Get going then. I think everybody seems to have joined us. So thank you very much. Good evening. And thanks for taking the time for us tonight to join our webinar. I'm Zoe Toon, Marketing Coordinator at the Low Carbon Hub, and you're joining us for the final webinar of our Community Energy Fund 2021 series, which the whole series we've been focusing on sort of the work we do at the Low Carbon Hub and all the different facets and elements to what we do. And for those of you that don't know and are joining us perhaps for the first time, the Low Carbon Hub is an environmental social enterprise, and we're focused on finding ways we're out to prove we can meet the energy needs in a way that's good for people and good for the planet. As I mentioned, we've done a number of previous webinars this year and last year. We did some last year on one of our projects, Project Leo, and all of our previous webinars are available on the Low Carbon Hub's YouTube channel. I'll pop a link in the chat a bit later on. And so we're going to be recording this webinar tonight. So that will be available later this week, just to be aware of that. And we're very fortunate tonight. We're being joined by Tom Heel, the Business Development Director of the Low Carbon Hub. And he leads on sort of all the renewable energy projects that the Hub's involved in. And he's going to be giving us a look at our most recent project, Ray Valley Solar, a ground mount solar installation tonight. So I know there's been lots of interest. I'm sure we'll get a lot of questions. We're going to take questions after the presentation tonight. So Tom's going to go through his slides. If you do have any questions, do pop them in the chat. I'm going to be keeping an eye on them and putting them away so we can ask them to Tom at the end and get some discussion going. Yeah, with that said, let's crack on. Over to you, Tom.
Oh, you've got one raised hand from Damien Toe, I see. I don't know if you want to just pick that up.
Okay, sure. Damien, everything all right? Damien? All right, not sure there, but we'll crack on, Tom. No worries.
Okay, thank you very much. So good evening, everyone. My name, as Zoe said, is Tom Heel, and I'm the Business Development Director at the Hub. So, and my job is essentially, as Zoe said, to bring forward our pipeline of projects. So this evening, I wanted to tell you a little bit about our work in general on ground mount solar projects, why we think they're becoming increasingly important, and to give you some detail on one project in particular that we're about to construct. So just
Tom, we've got someone saying you're a bit quiet. Is it possible at all just to
I'm slightly limited by the microphone here, because if I'm not using this, you'll hear family life in the background at some volume. So I probably, maybe if you could turn yourself up if it's still a problem, I'll have a go at bellowing a bit closer. But I think, yeah, I'm a bit limited, I'm afraid, with the technology at hand. But, I'll crack on and see where we get to. Right. So first, what I wanted to do was just give a little bit of context and hopefully answer this question. Why at the Hub have we decided to go on this journey and look at ground mount solar? The first answer, I guess, is really captured in this image and continues on from where Adriano left off with his Life on the Edge webinar, if you attended that. And as Zoe said, that's on the YouTube channel if you want to catch up with that later. So we're moving away from the centralised generation model embodied by Didcot there to a decentralised model, where generation is located closer to demand, where there's less infrastructure and cost and waste in transmission of energy, and in which generation and load are smarter and more responsive to one another. Through our involvement in Project Leo, we're absolutely committed to developing projects that enable us to fully explore that flexible energy future. And the second answer really to this question is regarding carbon emissions. So if I just move on to the next slide. So as many of you will know, we have a county target to reduce our carbon emissions by 50% over the next 9 years. To meet this challenging target, we have to increase our renewable energy capacity 6-fold. And if you look at that graph there on the slide, you can see this is quite a step change from where we've got to. If I can just get my cursor, hopefully you'll be able to see that. So this block of the graph here is where we got to actual data up to the end of 2018. And as you can see, the projection forward to the target we need to reach up here in the top right hand corner is really quite a steep acceleration from where we are at the moment, a really demanding growth rate. Apologies. So why are we projecting that growth will be principally solar? Well, we know that in Oxfordshire we're landlocked and we have very little wind resource, and we also know that the majority of the potential for hydro on the rivers have been explored. So quite simply, our most abundant resource is solar, and it's going to have to do the majority of the work to hit those targets. And to hit those targets, we're going to have to do it well and at some serious scale. So with 46 brilliant performing low carbon hub rooftop installations, the question could be, why not continue with this really successful program? Well, the answer to that is really threefold. Number one, we've seen a dwindling supply of hosts who are able to commit to roof lease to buy energy from the panels that we install for the approximately 20 years we need for that business model to be successful. The reasons for that are multiple, but essentially there aren't many people with big roofs who own their premises and are going to be there for 20 years, who we can rely on to be there for 20 years, and there really is a dwindling supply. Number two, the feed-in tariff, as most of you will know, has ended, and other incentives for local generation are being eroded by legislation, unfortunately. Number three, the planning system unfortunately does not mandate best use of the big new roofs that are being constructed across the county, and this really is a big shame. Although the business case is being improved by the solar industry as it catches up its cost base with legislation, there is a limited amount we can do about the supply of available and viable sites in the time frame we have to hit that target at 2030. Added to this, academic opinion is that perhaps 50% of our targets could ever be delivered from rooftop solar. Solar in our fields must therefore inevitably be a big part of the solution for us in Oxfordshire. There's just no other viable decentralised option in front of us. So based on this clear picture of where we need to go, we began to explore what local opportunities for projects of this type there might be. And I think that journey has been pretty much 18 months to 2 years from now, looking back. We've been contacted over that period regarding community involvement in 10 schemes, and I've just sort of dropped them on the map of the county here for you to get an idea of where they're located. These aren't the only schemes in the county, these just happen to be the ones that people have come to us about. 4 of these are the ones that I've indicated in red on that slide there, are fully consented, and I'll go on to explain what that means, and ready to build right now. And project leads that we've been experiencing seem to be on the increase. 50% of the leads that I've put up on that slide there have come to us in the last about sort of 10 months really, so it's really quite exciting to see that growth. We anticipate that all of these will be low carbon hub projects, but the appetite for community ownership of generation of this type and community engagement in projects of this type is really, really clear. If all these projects we get to be completed, which is quite a realistic prospect by the way, we would already be at 20% of the target that I put on that previous slide. So I think this is really, really good reason to feel very optimistic about the part that Grand Mount Solar can play. And just returning to that slide with that graph, we're beginning to feel that challenging trajectory is indeed more than deliverable. It's even feasible that we could accelerate the target. And given that we expect a decade of very rapid growth in Oxfordshire solar, we think it's absolutely the right time for Low Carbon Hub to get involved in projects of this scale. So, as I just mentioned a minute ago, important question is what's really needed to turn a field into a small renewable energy power station? So I think we need 3 main things, and I've tried to put those on this slide here. So first of all, starting at the bottom, the field needs to be close to a point of connection to the grid where the grid itself can cope with a really significant increase in generation coming online at that point. The grid really isn't designed for that from that point of view at the moment, so that's a significant change, and it isn't possible everywhere. Too much costly upgrade work to put new generation on the grid push project costs beyond viability, and that they are extremely sensitive to additional costs like that in our experience. The location also needs to be acceptable in planning terms and ideally have strong support in the local community. There's really an important role for the hub to play in that, and we have been actively involved through the planning process on a number of sites. So those 2 things are the site consents. So number 2, up in the top right hand corner of the slide there is revenue really. So projects, ground mount solar projects, they're very unlikely to be what's called a private wire connection, so directly connected to where the energy is being consumed. And they're very likely to export 100% of the energy they generate directly onto the grid. In that case, they need a demonstrable and secure agreement to sell the generated energy in place before they're constructed. So you need to have that deal in place to some extent before you even start building. This is no small task, and I'll come back to how significant a challenge that is later on. And thirdly, they need favourable finance terms or investment. Again, this is really challenging. Obviously, you also need to be able to demonstrate the revenue to be able to interest funders in projects. And this really is why the majority of solar farm projects, if you have your eye on any sort of news portals like Solar Power Portal for the sector, you see most of these projects are funded by pension funds rather than other entities. So in our own project at Ray Valley, which is located near Bicester, we've worked with an experienced developer to ensure we have each of those three in place. And I'm delighted to report actually that on Friday of last week we signed the construction contract for the project, and it's due to be completed in September. So we're really kind of hitting the ground, starting to run quite fast on it now. So it's really, really exciting. So the site, as I said, is just south of Bicester. I'll try and sort of get my cursor on here to orientate you. So the site's down here outlined in red. We're just outside the village of Arncott. And our neighbours are actually two other solar farms, one directly abutting the site, another one up here. We've also got this large MOD logistics site to the southeast of our site, HM Prison and Bullingdon Prison to the further to the east here, and also the Graven Hill site of self-built housing just outside Bicester. So some really interesting neighbours presenting the potential to partner with some of our smart grid trials under Project Leo, which Adriano described last webinar. The other exciting thing from that point of view is we have 2 full years of operation during Project Leo to gather any learning from those smart grid trials. So that's really, really exciting. It's great to have the project going forward at this point. The other point to note, I suppose, is that we have planning consent for a battery storage system at the site. That's not going to be part of the year 1 build and probably won't come forward for a couple of years in reality, but it's really, really exciting to have the potential to explore that further in time and when battery storage at that sort of scale becomes more viable economically. So as I said, we've signed the construction contract, the project design is now complete, and I've just included some key points about that on this slide to give you an idea of the size of it and the number of homes we can supply with our project, and the energy spend will be offsetting each year with renewables in the county. So it's really quite exciting scale. And to give you a bit more of an idea of scale, some figures I didn't put up on that slide is the area of the site is about 95 acres. So if that's your language, that gives you an idea. And it's also about 1 kilometre long. So between look across the long side there. So it's really quite a significant scale project. Also a bit about the panels themselves. The ones we're using on this site are bifacial. And that means they have clear glass on both the sky facing side and the ground facing side. And that's quite interesting. It's quite a relatively new technology. And what that enables them to do is capture some of the reflected light that bounces up off the grass below while the project's in operation. And interestingly, that's about 25% of the generation or the energy that hits the panels over the course of a year. So really quite a significant increment on a standard panel by doing that. It's relatively new, as I say, but we understand it's going to probably account for about 100% of the market of ground mount projects like this in coming years. So we want to just get on the curve there, not ahead of it, but we want to get on the curve. It's a big project, but it's not the largest project being built in the UK like this at the moment. But as we understand it, it will be the biggest community-owned solar installation in the UK when it's complete. So that's really, really exciting to have that in the county and to be part of it. And I suppose on from that, I just wanted to give you an idea of what this project means in terms of scale and the hub context. So this slide here has our growth in terms of energy generation year on year until the last sort of complete year that I had data for, 2018, 2019. So we've been growing the portfolio steadily over time. And this is the additional bar showing the generation that will come from Ray Valley, in the first year of operation. So really quite significant growth, 5.5 times the last full years generation. So huge change. So being mindful of that, it's of course important to recognise the significance of that growth for the hub, and we've been approaching this next step in our kind of development portfolio with significant caution. So the developer I mentioned before, Low Carbon Limited, we've retained their services, and they've realised projects to date powering about 100,000 homes. So they really have a great deal of experience in projects of this scale, and they will be our project managers for it until commissioning. And we've also struck up a long-term partnership with them. So they will be our O&M, our operation and maintenance partners for the site, as well as our asset managers for the long term, working alongside us at the hub to manage the project in the long term. They've got a really well-aligned ethos with us, and the partnership to date has been really positive in working with them. So I wanted to next say a bit more about the impact our project will have on the site. It's undeniably a really significant engineering intervention into the landscape. And although we're sandwiched between an MOD site and another solar park, as I mentioned before, we wanted to ensure it's an exemplar of how a solar park can be realised in this kind of context. And that's also what our stakeholders told us. All 80 respondents to a survey we put out about what we should do in ground mount solar indicated that overwhelmingly positive support, which is really reassuring, but also a significant number asked questions about what exemplar of land and biodiversity management around a solar farm could and should look like. As the image at the top of that, the photograph at the top there demonstrates, currently the site is a large, flat, open field, punctuated only by a few hedges, 1 or 2 ditches and grazing sheep at times. And our intention is to continue that grazing. And as you can see from the image at the bottom, I just put my cursor on that so hopefully you can see that. There's quite a good deal of space between each, these are called trays, the frames of panels of open grass. So there's about 8 metres between each of those. And actually the space beneath the front of each of these panels here and the ground is about 1 metre. So the sheep are able to pass easily underneath and have uninterrupted grazing across the site. And we've got a partnership with the landowner who will continue to graze the site once the site's in operation. So that's really excellent. But in addition to this, we have a couple of key attributes we wanted to build on. So on this right-hand pitch here, this pink line that goes down from the northeastern corner down to the southwestern corner, and then again across the bottom, splitting the site down the bottom here. That's a bridleway. That's gives us a really, although there's I should add a hedge screening between the bridleway and the panels, that gives us a really excellent opportunity for engagement, and we're hoping to capitalise on that. And we've got really considerable areas for landscaping along the western boundary, including that bridleway, and around ponds that you can see, one of which is highlighted in the drawing in the centre of the slide there. So we've got lots of opportunities, and in total we have about 7 acres of land outside our fence line to make use of, so it's a really fantastic opportunity. A detailed landscaping strategy is in development to capitalise on that, and to really give a really big boost to local biodiversity, we hope. Outside of that, we're also exploring opportunities with the local wildlife trust BBOUT, both on the site for those 7 acres I've mentioned, but also on surrounding land, subject to engagement with the landowner about that. So lots of exciting opportunities about biodiversity. Let's go on to the next slide. Okay, great. So I really wanted to finish by talking about the next challenge I have in my mind, and I mentioned this before, and this is about securing long-term partnerships for selling the energy generated from sites like ours. As I mentioned this before, we've been one of the key aspects of viability of projects like this. And just looking at that figure on the slide there, that's, it's a really arresting number of how significant the expenditure we have in the county that goes out each year, and which by and large is spent on one of the big 6 fossil fuel companies, or largely to fossil fuel companies via those. much of that spend is from large institutions within the county who are our biggest energy consumers. And we've been working for about a year now on finding ways we can connect their consumption directly with local generators. Rather than a direct connection, as I said before, this wouldn't be a private wire, this will be a contractual connection. But this is becoming quite a well-trodden path in energy markets to have what are called power purchase agreements between generators and off-takers. It's, to me, a hugely exciting opportunity to see if we can close the loop in spend within the county and create the secure revenue stream we need to make many, many more projects viable. This is extremely exciting, as I say, and I'm optimistic on the basis of the relationships we've made over the last 6 months or so, and the opportunities we're seeing before us to foster those direct relationships between consumers and the generators in their backyards. So we're hoping to be able to bring something material forward in the next few months to pick up the generation of our plant once it's had a couple of years to operate. That's all I wanted to run through with you initially about the project, but hopefully that's put a few questions in people's minds, and maybe once I've closed down the presentation we can have a chat about questions that you've got for me following that. I could see that Zoe's gone off camera, but let me stop share and see if she's back available.
There we go. I am back. I'm in, for those that don't know, I'm in our office at the Wood Centre, and because I've been sat still for so long, the lights went off. So I was left in the dark for a bit there, but I'm back. So, and yes, we've got a few questions. So let's start with this one from Alistair. Could Didcot deliver solar? And is that something we've looked at?
Yes. So could it deliver solar? So there are some interesting opportunities. I mean, I'll probably take it from a different point of view. So I would say that any field anywhere can deliver solar, providing that you can put in place those three things that I mentioned. So really we need an engaged landowner who wants to be part of a project like this, and a good local grid connection point as a starting point. So I think yes, Didcot can deliver it as well as anywhere. And the good thing about Didcot, I guess, is that with the decommissioning of the power station, there is some fantastic transmission infrastructure there ready to connect to, and one would assume that would make for a lower cost connection. So I think Didcot can definitely play a part. We're really looking for a viable field close to a point of connection, as I said before. But yeah, Didcot would be a fantastic place.
Excellent. And then we've got lots of questions coming in now. One from Ashley, just touching on the sort of sheep grazing and production, and how that might not necessarily be seen by some as the best for a climate perspective, and so whether any other alternatives to kind of land use had been found or looked at.
I think so. I guess on that bit of land, sheep grazing is the status quo, and that is the business of the farmer whose land we've leased. So his requirement in putting in place the land option, which the developer who we purchased the site off, or the project off, his requirement was to have grazing as part of that. So it is definitely something that's got to be part of the picture to comply with that. But I think the truth is there's lots of options out there, and one of those images I had up of another solar farm elsewhere. You've got quite a lot of wildflowers, very biodiverse from that point of view, and our aspiration is to blend the two, I guess, to have a wildflower border with kind of the planting strategy that, as I say, is being developed at the moment, alongside grazing. So I think it's viable on other sites, but we're a bit constrained with the agreements that are in place for ours.
And we've got a question from Mark, who asks what do we think the workload is going to be like for us at the hub when the solar farm has been built?
What we think it would be like for us. Interesting. Well, I suppose I could try and answer that in a cheeky way, in that what we hope it will be is inspirational and provide more projects for us to look at. I think the truth of actually managing these things is that It's going to be twofold. One will be managing the contracts we have with Low Carbon Limited for operating and maintaining, and also for asset management, which includes reporting on the performance of the site and things like that. So we'll be managing those contracts. I don't anticipate the management burden of those being super significant, but the other thing we're going to be doing is exploring the flexibility services opportunities that Adriano talked about in the last webinar, and that may well unpack into quite a significant amount of work for us. So we're really excited about that opportunity. So I suppose flexibility services and further project opportunities would be our sort of dream outcome from this.
Sure. And there's a few people in the chat mentioning beehive, and I'm sure they were mentioned at one point.
Yeah, I should have had my jar of low carbon honey with me for this, shouldn't I? It's just downstairs. So Low Carbon Limited, who, as I said, have got have operated and delivered a large number of projects. They're still involved in a large number of those, and they I wish I could remember the name of the organisation that does their beehives, but they will be doing that on our sites, and they do that on their other existing sites, and they've very kindly delivered us a package of low carbon honey from their other solar sites recently.
Excellent. And so we've got a question from Dick Wolf. Any conversations with local authorities about PPAs for social housing?
Interesting. So lots of conversations with local authorities, and they were one of the main institutions I was referring to really before. So local authorities and universities are sort of the big ones that are our first opportunity to work with on PPAs. The thing about social housing is that most of those units will have, well, in fact, all of them, I think, will have individual meters for every homeowner, or every tenant, sorry. And it's really, really tricky to strike a PPA that covers lots and lots of individual homes. So we are, as you probably are aware, working with other projects that are like social housing, where we've got solar on the roof. And in that circumstance, again, there's the same tricky problem. And what we end up having to do is connect our panels into the landlord supply, which generally does a little bit of ancillary heating to the kind of communal spaces and a bit of lighting, but very little else, maybe some lifts if there's lifts involved. So that's a bit of a frustrating disconnect. It's really not the sort of ideal and most efficient way to use the generation on the roofs, not in terms of kind of carbon emissions, ethos, or indeed in terms of economics for us putting installations in either. So we're trying to crack that problem on some other projects, working with City Council on some of their social housing in Rose Hill, where we are working with energy suppliers to see how we can create a more direct connection between the panels generating on the roof and the people's bills who live in those homes. That's again part of Project Leo, and I won't go too much further into the detail of that now, but it's something we're very actively looking at. Now the jump from that to connecting a solar farm with individuals is quite a big one, but our hope is through working on PPAs with institutions who will be purchasing that for their own sort of corporate, if you will, energy use, for whether it's the town hall, leisure centres, whatever it ends up being in their corporate estate. We're hoping that there's another jump after that to think about individual homeowners, but that's probably a little way off now.
Yeah. And we're having a few questions around sort of the funding for Ray Valley. How is it funded? Is it just community funding? Where else is the money coming from? As well as sort of, are there figures for build cost and revenue available?
Yeah, I can do all of those. So the cost of the project is going to be about £12 million. And the funding for that is it's a combination of things. So there's a small part of that, I guess relatively small, which is 2.4 million, which is coming from Triodos Bank. So working with an ethical bank who have quite stringent requirements for the type of sites that they can support projects on. So that was quite interesting. They can only support projects on the lowest possible grade of farmland, for example, so that they make sure that they're not adversely impacting farming through supporting projects. I won't go too much further into the detail of that, but they've been a really excellent partner to work with. So that funding is in place. We've raised a very significant amount, about 4 million in our last two community share raises, one of which is still open. So do take a look at that on FX. And it closes at the end of this month. And the balance will come from two sources. One is grant funding from Innovate UK to support the clever stuff we're trying to do under Project Leo with the project in the long term. And the rest is coming from a short-term construction fund we have in place with Oxford City Council, which we've had in place with them for a number of years and has enabled a large number of our projects to happen to date. So that will be the short-term solution to bridge the gap, and the longer-term solution will most likely be further share raises for the public.
Excellent. And so, yeah, like I said, lots and lots of questions coming, which is great. So keep them coming. It's got a question from Mike. Who is the PPA with? Yeah,
good question. So so that's been an interesting one. I know I said you must have it in place before the project is built. So we've got we have got a number of offers. We've got a short list, and we agreed with Triodos that we could not have secured that before we constructed this project. And the real quirk there is the Project Leo funding, which is enabling us to be less commercial than projects would normally have to be. So we're in a very fortunate position because of that Leo funding. Because there's a shortlist and a sort of a tender process underway, I'm not really able to say who they are, but you can certainly imagine that the kind of partners we would choose to work with for a PPA would go through a number of ethical evaluation steps, and you can be reassured that we are being very careful about the partner we choose. I should also say on that the PPA initially will be 2 years, and alongside that 2 years, which was the requirement of Triodos Bank, as well as what we wanted ourselves, to give us both security and future flexibility to develop these institutional PPAs. So it'll be initially 2 years, and then we'll be working on replacing that with something with local institutions, we hope.
Excellent. And we've got I think this might be a quick question. How many rows of panels are there going to be? I don't know.
Goodness, what an excellent question. Without looking at the drawing and counting them, I can't answer it, but
we know how many individual panels there's going to be.
Yes, there's just under 36,000 panels.
Wow.
Initially, we were expecting it to be 45,000, but then we changed to bifacial panels, which are marginally more expensive, but you get a lot more bang for your buck, I suppose, and we were also able to use a smaller area by having those bifacial panels. So they were definitely the right thing to do. But number of rows, that's a really good question.
We'll have to look at that one.
We'll have to look that one up. I'm just thinking now, a lot, a kilometre of them.
And we're having a few questions around sort of how secure the site's going to be, how the panels are going to be protected from vandalism, especially in relation to the bridleway and access through there.
Right, fine, yeah, no problem. So the panels, well, the entire park is enclosed by a high security fence, which is 2 meters high, and will have wire at the top, things like that, and will be completely monitored by CCTV 24 hours a day around the perimeter, and all points of access will be alarmed, as well as all containers and infrastructure on site within the fence will be alarmed. So there will be 24-hour cover of that. That obviously isn't the prettiest thing. So we've got this hedge line between the bridleway and the fence line to screen that fencing, because we don't think that's what everyone wants to see, obviously. But we hope that also that fence line will have virtues in terms of making the thing less visible. And it's really interesting. I mean, I would encourage you to go out to the site and have a walk around now. It's a bridleway. You can definitely go and walk down there. And it's astonishing that neighbouring solar park that you may not have seen on the images I put up there, but it's quite a big area, and because the land is so flat, with a 2 metre hedge, it's completely invisible. You just don't know it's there. So it's I don't think Obviously in construction people will be very aware of it, but I think after a few years people could well pass it by and not know it was there.
And just a quick sort of follow up there. Is it an electric fence or just a regular fence?
It's not an
No.
electric fence. I think there would be quite a
I
lot
think-
of yeah, I think there'll be one or two legislative barriers to doing that, but yeah, it's a good question. No, not electric.
Um, and there's been quite a few questions all around the sort of the life of the solar panels
Mm.
and how long sort of expect them to go on for.
Okay. So the lease we have for the site is 40 years, and we expect to operate a solar farm on the site for 40 years, and we expect to do it for community benefit for the duration of that. So we've designed everything with the expectation of being involved for that period. All of the component parts have different warranties. For example, the mounting system that they're on has a 30-year warranty, so one would hope that 40 years is not an unreasonable expectation of the lifespan of something that has a warranty for 30 years. The panels themselves have a 25-year warranty. There's plenty of examples out there of panels lasting significantly longer than that, but it may well be that at 20 years, 25 years, we start to think about repaneling the site. I mean, that's a real consideration. So once we've paid off our funders, I guess we're at liberty to do whatever we want with it and reinvest in it. So that's a consideration. Inverters, so the technology that converts the energy from DC from the panels into AC that goes into the grid. They have a warranty of about 5 years, and the business case has a sinking fund for replacement of those built into it, so that we expect to replace those periodically. Probably each one, I say on average, would be about a 10-year lifespan. So those are the key components. There's transformers, HV electricals equipment, which all has different lifespans, but we've got a component replacement plan for all those things that will keep the park available and running for 40 years.
And we've got a question from Chris saying, can you say what the grid connection cost is, and will the DNO supply all connection services? And the DNO, just in case anyone doesn't know, is the distribution network operator.
Yeah. So can I say what it is? Off the top of my head. As you sound like someone who's well versed. So there are two aspects of grid connection costs. One is called non-contestable, and that basically means the work that SSEN, the network operator in our area, as it is, will not let anybody else do. So that's the work we have to pay them to do. And then there is contestable works, which are works that we can tender out to a range of approved contractors. So between those two packages of work, I think the costs are something like 550,000, something like that, but it kind of depends where you draw the line. So our contestable works are being done under what's called a wrapped contract with the main contractor who's delivering the whole of the scheme, so the kind of the line between what is their cost and what is the main EPC, so that's the engineering procurement contract that is building the whole site, is a bit grey. So it's probably about a little bit north of £500,000.
Excellent. And we've got a question here from John, who's talking sort of about a different experience with developers, and said you mentioned developers have been approaching you, but that hasn't been their experience in East Anglia. Mm-hmm. And he says he's identified a 1.8 gigawatt of solar farm currently in planning, but none are currently offering community benefits or ownership. Mm-hmm. And sort of how can we best approach developers to change this?
So yeah, that's a really good question. I think there are, I would not say we are experts in this. We are experts in trying to help these things and connect people with the communities if they're willing, but not experts in mandating that. I think that of the parks we've been contacted about, all of those developers where there isn't a sort of direct involvement for the hub in those projects have been interested to make their journey through the planning system smoother by trying to get our support or help with engaging with local people and local communities. So I think the truth is, from what we know, the only help is with the planning system and advocating your local planners for mandating some community involvement in the project. And I think probably starting at that point and doing what you can to engage with the developers and perhaps encourage them through whatever means to engage with you to make their journey through planning smoother. I'm afraid I can't be more helpful than that. I suppose we're in, as like I say, we're in the business of advocacy and not sort of we haven't got as far as going out there and engaging with developers on projects that haven't come to us yet.
Yeah, and this sort of links in with a few other questions we've been getting around community involvement and sort of did we find that offering a community ownership option reduce the amount of opposition from people, and sort of can we put a value on community involvement?
Good, really good question. So this site we took on just post planning, so we didn't have the through the planning system engagement on this one that we have had on others. That said, like I said, it's quite an interesting part of Oxfordshire in that it's quite an industrialised landscape, strangely, and being right next to the MOD site, and in fact the MOD site shields us from the village, so we're completely invisible from the village past these quite large MOD sheds. It basically led to there being only 2 objections to the planning application. So and those 2 objections were not really material. One was about access, basically, and that was well, I won't go into the details of it, but they're available online if you want to take a look in the Charwell planning portal. But it just sailed through planning basically with no opposition here. So obviously that won't be the case in every site, but here we were fortunate to take one on which the local community really weren't concerned about.
We've got a question from Anne saying, is there any danger to the site from the River Ray flooding?
Another good question. So through the planning process and also through the design process, we've done a flood risk assessment. So there is, according to that flood risk assessment, no danger of that happening. There will be some mitigation measures put in place around key electrical infrastructure, such as raising it up, bunding, if you know what that is, and also small drainage ditches to keep water away from key infrastructure. I've been there over this winter, and as I'm sure many of you know who live in the Thames Valley, it's been a pretty wet winter, and it's there's standing water around on site, much as there is standing water around in lots of fields around the place, but no sort of moving water flooding or anything like that that would concern us for accessing equipment or endangering it in any way. So no, it's a fair way away from the Ray River itself, and this land doesn't historically flood at all.
Excellent. Good to know. And we're getting quite a few questions around batteries and battery storage and whether that's included in the planning permission, and could battery storage be used for compressed air energy storage as well, or instead of, and sort of how seriously are batteries being considered and what are they going to be used for?
Yeah, no problem. So yeah, all good questions. So we are very serious about batteries, and the planning consent for batteries on this site was one of the attractions of it. That said, we know that the business model for batteries is not that strong at the moment, the investment case. So those batteries that are being installed tend to be doing a slightly different thing to what we're trying to do here. There's quite a lot of standalone batteries that are doing grid services exclusively, and that's not really what we're looking at in Leo. So what we're doing on batteries is dipping our toe in the water, and we have installed a battery at Rosehill School, primary school in Oxford, which is there's some videos and material on our various social media outlets to have a look at about that, and that's basically a test case for us to start exploring how batteries can be used to do the flexibility services we're testing through Leo. Once we've got Ray Valley up and running, and we can look about how that's performing we can scale up what we know from our test bed at Rose Hill School and start thinking about how the business case shapes up for batteries at Ray Valley. So it probably will be after the first 2 years of the operation of the site. There's a virtue in that because the contractor who builds the site is the operator and maintainer for the first 2 years in solar farm projects. So it doesn't make sense to mess with anything too significantly in terms of construction projects until they're off site. So I think we'll have 2 years of having a good look at it and then make our decision then.
And sort of a more specific question from John about batteries, saying, seeing as solar doesn't produce energy at night, isn't the storage battery essential to provide power when it's most required in the evenings? And would there be the possibility to rent the battery to allow for future technology developments in sort of capacity of batteries?
I guess as part of a balanced energy system that is entirely solar, definitely batteries are 100% essential. Yeah. So and that isn't what we have at the moment, but that's, I guess, that kind of load and generation shifting that you can do with batteries by taking the generation of the day into the night is a really exciting thing and something we're really keen to look at. But again, I think probably same answer as before. It's a kind of walk before you can run, and we've got to be very careful with the investments we make. Obviously, we're investing people's money. We are very rigorous about the way we evaluate the business cases of the things we do, and we're also very rigorous about the way we invest the research funding we've got from Innovate UK. So we want to make sure we do it the right way. So it'll be a sort of slowly on batteries, but we expect to get there.
And a question from Eric: does the low carbon have any more sites in Oxfordshire that we're looking at or considering at the moment?
More, yes, yeah, we do. So of those 10 sites that I put up, there is, I guess, a realistic chance of us being able to be involved, should we want to, in 3 of those, but including this one. This is a really big undertaking. For the hub, as I put up on that slide, the change in generation against what we did in last year and the year before is really significant, as is the scale of expenditure for the project. So I think probably realistically we'll take it perhaps a little bit slower than diving into those projects. We want to make sure we do a good job of Project Leo, and also that we think about what follows on from Project Leo. So lots of things in the mix there, but yeah, there is a realistic prospect of us being involved in others. But as I said on my last slide, the thing I'm really excited about is getting involved in connecting consumers with generators, and that will be part of the viability picture for any future projects anyway.
Excellent. And we've had quite a few questions around suppliers and who supplied the panels and where are they being manufactured, and also whether Brexit has had an impact on any of this at all.
Yes, yeah. So both of those are. I can show you the scars of both of those experiences, but yeah, where to start? So Brexit, yes, it's had an impact, and that's been really frustrating and 11th hour for us, and really challenging. So the reality of the industry that builds projects like this is that it isn't in the UK. So the expertise, although there are expertise like Low Carbon Limited who are very experienced of managing projects, they are not the workforce who builds them. They are just a team of really experienced engineers and project managers, etc., who bring these projects forward, planners, etc. So projects like this have always been developed with this kind of scale. There may be 1 or 2 smaller ones that have been developed with UK only labour, but the majority of it comes from Europe, either sort of Spain or Eastern Europe historically. And I'm sure our own solar industry will get to delivering projects this scale, but it isn't there yet. So new restrictions with visas have, as a result of Brexit, which obviously only became apparent at the end of December, have hit us on cost a fair bit, and that's been quite painful and quite a difficult process to work through. But it hasn't undermine the viability of the project. It's taken a bit of a hit out of the community benefit we can deliver, which is a really big shame. But we have to wear those punches, unfortunately. On where the panels come from, well, the case is that most panels come from China. The vast majority, I couldn't give you a percentage, but it's not far off 100% of global panels come from China. And that's tricky, given you're dealing with perhaps a cultural difference in doing business, and we've been hit a little bit by that cultural difference in the last few weeks with price changes at the last minute, which has been quite stressful. But again, we've found a compromise there. It's not the compromise perhaps we would have wanted, but we've got a compromise there that's maintained the viability of the project. So both of those things are less than ideal, but we've got our way through those.
And we've got quite a few questions as well around sort of the selling of the power. So are we selling power via an energy supplier? Have we got plans to supply direct? And can we elaborate on the arrangements? How long is the contract?
Yeah, sure. So the supplier will be I suppose it won't necessarily be an energy supplier that one might have heard of as a sort of retail consumer, but it will be one that will have been vetted both by us in terms of our ethical review and our business case review. Obviously, it's got to be the right number, and it will be also reviewed by Triodos Bank, who within our lending agreement with them have sign off on whichever PPA provider we go with. It will be a 2-year minimum term agreement to start with, and as I said before, we're looking for longer term agreements to try and connect big local consumers like local authorities and institutions like to universities in Oxford, who might be interested in being part of local supply. We think that's a really exciting opportunity, and we're desperate to make that work. We think it could be absolutely transformative in unlocking that really steep curve required to get to our targets at 2030. So we're really energized about working on that. It's probably, I think, 6 months away from completion, but we're getting there.
Wow. I got a question from Alan saying, with grid at present surges, when grid surges occur during a national event, would solar farms be able to handle this type of upsurge or not?
Depends. So the answer to the question is, I'm not sure I understand what the question is exactly. Maybe there might be a but I'm going to have a go, and forgive me if I get it wrong. You just feel free to repeat it in a slightly different way. But basically, the way this will be connected will have all kinds of protection devices in the both in the DNO, in the SSEN substation on site, and in our own what's called customer substation on site. So there will be all kinds of protections devices that deal with surges, be they lightning or grid. So they hopefully, with the engineering design being done by experienced people, all of those things will be taken care of, and we wouldn't see any risk to our infrastructure from that.
Oh. And a question from Eleanor: is there an option of balancing the solar electricity with wind now that onshore wind is more viable?
I think that's probably something I'm not qualified to answer in detail, but I'll have a crack. So the yes is, I think, is the truth. I think that it's really exciting to have that kind of balance nationally, but on a local level, we have precious little wind resource in Oxfordshire, so it probably isn't going to be balanced locally in that sense. So we'll have to look at what we can do with solar, and then in answer, as I answered the other person's question before around batteries, batteries and solar together are probably more likely to be what we end up doing. Batteries or storage of other kinds, as that person also mentioned, will be more likely what we end up doing locally in Oxfordshire. And there is quite a good wind resource in one or two counties bordering us, so probably that balance of wind and solar might happen on a kind of slightly more macro level than county.
Okay, excellent. I am aware that we're approaching the end of our time, and I would just say I have two A4 pages of questions left, so I don't think we'll get to them all tonight. But what I'll do is I'll type them up, and maybe Tom will be able to give some answers to some of them that we can send out to you a bit later. I'm really interested though. Someone's asked whether there's a contract for cleaning the panels, and I'm very intrigued. Is there?
Yes, there is. So there's, well, in the operation and maintenance contract, there's they will be cleaned. I'm not sure if it's annually or biannually, but they will be cleaned. And there are, various other things that get done, like which are of interest and excitement to people like me, like drone surveys, looking at the kind of so when a panel is performing badly or has an electrical problem, you can get little areas of heat where if you do a drone survey with an infrared camera, you can see where potentially you might get a future failure and you might want to replace a panel, things like that. So that's part of the O&M contract, as is things like strimming when things get long, if we don't end up doing grazing as frequently as we might like, so all kinds of things like that. So yeah, and that's all in there, all thought about.
Excellent. And we've got, as I said, yeah, there's lots of questions. But we've got one from Hugh, who says in parts of southern Europe, in Greece, he sees solar panels mounted on an array driven by an electric motor so that the panels can follow the sun east to west and change their angle to the sun as well. And this would obviously help generate more electricity. Why don't we see this in the UK? And that's really interesting. I think one of our colleagues, Saskia, actually put something in the chat as to one of the Oxfordshire innovation projects with Duff and Associates. They've been actually working on a prototype of this. And I don't know whether it's probably not far enough advanced to have considered it this time around.
No, there's some really detailed answers to those questions, and there are areas that I'm very interested in. So on the let's take the Oxfordshire one first because it's simple. So yeah, we had a chat with them. They are interested in a test site for demonstrating how their solar trackers could work in operation. We are a bit big for them really. And the challenge is that also when you go out to a single contractor to deliver something for you, asking for them to weave in something a bit novel like that is quite tricky. So it wasn't really an option, although I did chat in detail to them and give them some ideas of other sites. So hopefully they've managed to find one. So their technology looks really exciting, and I think probably in 5 years' time it might well be something that you looked at for a project like this, but just not at this point. But on trackers more generally, Warrington Council have done a really interesting couple of projects recently, which are on trackers. The contractor called GridServe, if you look them up, I'm sure they've got quite a lot of material on their website about those Warrington schemes that they've done. They are east-west trackers, and they with one panel on either side that kind of follow the sun with a centre pivot. Really interesting technology. Again, we got this project post-planning, so the planning was already in place for fixed frames, so it wasn't something we could look at. And also sort of on a personal level, I would want to take quite a risk-averse view of anything we do, and I would say that the trackers, although they look great, the maintenance burden on those is probably quite high, and I'd want to see ones in operation for 5 years or so before we sort of dove into that really. But yeah.
Yeah. No, it's exciting development. All right, we're at 7 o'clock, everyone. I just want to thank you so much for all those questions. We've got so many, so I'll get typing those up, and we can work on finding some answers to those and sending them out. I'm going to be uploading this webinar recording to YouTube later this week, and I'll send around an email with the link in that, as well as the questions and hopefully some answers. So thanks, Tom, so much for your time this evening. It's been really interesting, lots of really interesting discussion and chat. And thank you all so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. Bye.